Another hot business these days is Hulu. Over-the-top television, we don't have to tell you how great it is. The content, the original content, the aggregation of content, it's done an amazing job, and it's really helped change the ecosystem of much of television and advertising. And to have us talk a little bit about that, we've got Pato, or Patrizio Spagnoletto, or we call him Pato for short and easier, but he's a great guy. Pato, please come to the stage and tell us what's going on, and let's give him a hand. Pato.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. After the last two speakers, I thought I would lighten it up a little bit and talk about The Handmaid's Tale. Light topic. No, what I wanted to spend the next, 15 minutes or so is talking about the framework that we use at Hulu for our marketing, and then we can use some specific examples. And honestly, for me, when I do these keynotes, it's as much about therapy for me, going through it and sharing with you guys what we don't know, in the hopes that I can learn back from you and the other speakers. So with that in mind, if we break it out into three things, there's the audiences, the messaging, and the media. When you start with audiences, so who here watches television? All right, so by definition, you are our target audience, which is obviously not the right way to do it. When we think about video and content consumption at Hulu, there's a couple of layers that we try to dig into. The first is the most basic. When we think about demographics, income, geo, and the like, that gives us a first level of insight into who our audience is. And we could stop there and kind of take that to the bank. The next level down, though, is what are these audiences watching? So different people will watch different pieces of content, and they are motivated by different things, which lead us to the third part, which for me is actually the most fascinating, and that is why are people watching what they're watching? And there's certain clusters of people who watch television because of fear of missing out. Content on television is social currency. When Game of Thrones happens, or The Handmaid's Tale, or your favorite show, that gives you social currency to talk and be in a social circle. Other of us watch television as a moment of escape, right? You have a long day, you just want to unplug. For many of us, myself included, television is a moment of bonding with my family. So at the end of a day or over the weekend, that is what brings me together with my kids to have something to experience together. And the fun part is that I can actually be all three at different points. So when I think about audience segmentation, the first learning for us is that nobody fits in a bucket, and nobody fits in a bucket at any given point in time because we move around in those audience segments. So before we start thinking about creative and before we start thinking about media plan, to me what is most fascinating is to really understand our audiences. What I wanted to put up here is a real-time framework that's been a little sanitized of how we approach our audiences. So the framework that we use is fairly straightforward. The very first thing we do is we're lucky enough to have a very significant base of current subscribers. So we take that first-party data, and then we export it, and we append as much data as possible from name the company that has data. And we work with our partners at to help us understand what are those high-value audiences. And that's the bottom boxes. Hard to read. It just says sub-audience 1, 2, and 3 with different colors. And those are those micro-audiences, right? So one micro-audience could be city singles, the people who are core nevers. They've never subscribed to cable. They have a high propensity to use streaming video. And they look very, very different from the next micro-audience, which could be something that we call flourishing family. Younger families that are in the Midwest that have a very different purpose. And you kind of rinse and repeat that for as many times as you need to for those micro-audiences. Now, when we overlay a media buy on these, it's somewhat simple to say, okay, I know who these micro-audiences are, let me go after them with programmatic and social, but that's really not where it ends. We have to boil it up all the way to some of those big tentpoles that we have. And now I'm going to go from the top down. There are big tentpoles in our industry. Those tentpoles could be seasonal, obviously like the World Series that's happening right now. to the launch of Game of Thrones, since we do carry HBO, to season 2 of Handmaid's Tale, or the launch of Future Man and Runaways, which are 2 new originals that we're launching in the next few weeks. Those are creative temples that we have. And now the trick is to find the right audiences and to map those audiences within those temples, so that when we look at media opportunities, whether it's a Super Bowl ad or whether it's a sponsorship of a skating league in Ohio, we use the same filter. It doesn't matter. We need to make sure that whatever our media buys are, that they're mapped to a specific audience. So when you start at the top, you have these big ones where you just can't target, right? Super Bowl you can't target, but obviously it's a very large reach. Now, we will choose to do or not do the Super Bowl based on how that event indexes with our audiences. Now, for Hulu, it actually does over-index on multiple of those audiences. So from an ROI perspective, it makes sense for us to invest in something that big. But as we go down into these smaller segments, or these segments 1, 2, 3, and 4, this is like, if you think of that city person or the flourishing family, they're very, very different. And therefore, the way that we think about the message and the way that we think about our media buys are very different, and they're very unique. Because the way that I talk to my wife about Hulu is very different than the way that I talk to my single friends about Hulu. And so we have to recognize that. Which leads me to really around the messaging. And one of the simple things for us is getting to know the audience. And when I say getting to know them, I mean really getting to know them. For me, the thing that helps me the most as a marketer is I really try and put a face to the audience. Like, some marketers call it personas or use cases. But the more I can know about these segments, the better it is for me to relate to that segment and to create a message that hopefully is relevant for them, right? So that goes back to a lot of that data that we put together and creating those journeys for each one of these users. And in fact, once we've done that, then the next part is around a very simple framework that we are starting to use right now. And this applies to the messaging as much as it does to the media buys. So from a messaging perspective, let's put this through a use case. In number 1, around discovering, there's no need to educate people on television, right? So for Hulu, it's about understanding and having people discover how Hulu is different and hopefully better for that target audience, right? Now, a lot of the companies out there, Hulu, about 5 or 6 months ago, we launched a new live TV service. So because fighting against Netflix and Amazon was not enough, we decided to turn around and go and fight against DirecTV and the cable companies and just have some fun with it, right? So it's been a real fun challenge. But the point in this is that a lot of these companies will do one of two things. Either one, they will feature the content, right? They will feature Family Guy, This Is Us, and all of those great pieces of content. Or they will feature actual functional features, price point, the number of streams, things that you can do. But neither of those apply if you're not in the market, if you're not thinking about it. I can talk to you about content from Hulu, but guess what? You can watch This Is Us on multiple platforms. So my job is not to convince you that This Is Us is a great show. My job is to convince you that it's actually better to watch it on Hulu, right? And for us, it all is based on a premise that TV should love you back. And there's multiple ways that we bring that to market, whether it's through the way that you experience it, or the way that we enable you to have all of the things in one place, or the fact that it's personalized in the actual product and the content that we use. So in that number 1 box, it's really about brand love. It's about helping you understand how Hulu can help you better enjoy the content and the experience in a premise that is all around TV being better together. And together can mean socially. Together can also mean having your entire SVOD library and entire sports and news and live TV all in one place. So if I can make a contact with you there, that's great. And if I can't, that's okay too, because while we would love to have every single person, we know that different people have different preferences. So for us, it's about super serving an audience that we think we are most passionate about and that we can best serve. The next part is, if I have a share of mind and a little bit of a share of heart, is really to start to educate and engage. And now we can start to talk about specific product features, and we can start to talk about the content that we have, whether it's licensed or whether it's original. and then move you through the funnel, although I really, small parentheses, I hate the funnel as an analogy. It's a relationship, right? I don't go to my kids, I'm like, hey, what part of the funnel am I in with you, right? Like, it doesn't work. Like, we are in a relationship with our consumers. So in that relationship, if I've gone through the first 2 dates, the third date is the ring, right? And now we can talk about like, okay, let's try this out. And Hulu does have free trial periods because we want people to try the service out and see if it's best for them. And for those who do choose to kind of go on to the next stage, which is around sharing and engaging, this is where, from a brand and a marketing perspective, it's really about making the most of that relationship. And making the most of that relationship, going back to that premise of personalization and experience, is we want to make sure that we can serve you the content that is most important and most relevant to you at the right time on the right device. That's why on our new platform, when you log in, we actually currently do not have an electronic program guide where you have to kind of stroll up and down. What we have is your lineup. And your lineup is personalized to you. It's based on your viewing preferences. It's based on what you've told us you like. And that could be a show. It could be an actor or actress. It could be a football team. It could be whatever it is. But the whole point here is about making it personalized. And the more we can create evangelists and people who love the brand, they go right back up to number 1 and help us spread the word. Because that, for us, is quite honestly the best way to grow our brand love, is by having more and more people who are not just satisfied, but enthusiastic about what the experience is with Hulu. This circle, by the way, can happen both at a brand perspective for Hulu. It also happens at a content perspective. So when we did launch The Handmaid's Tale, the lead up of the launch of Handmaid's Tale was over 9 months long. It started with a conversation through social channels. It started through CorpCom. It started through events. And it led up into media, so that by the time we had the first release at the end of April, there was an audience that was extremely eager to not just consume the show, but to talk about it. And thankfully, we were lucky enough to being off of a base of what was already a very popular book and a popular author. So it was really about kind of taking that essence and that insight and putting it into our conversations. So once we have this framework, the next part is putting it towards a media pie. And as you can tell, this is extremely stripped down. The slide had like a bunch of call outs of media partners and messages and all that good stuff. But the purpose of me sharing this with you is that from a marketing perspective, this is when we look at who are the right media partners. I did not alter this slide. Out of Home was there and is there because it does serve a very important purpose for us. And so as we go through that circle, like some of these channels can work in different places. One important thing for us is, I know that in the past, a lot of marketers basically start with a TV spot and then think about how do we make this an integrated campaign. At Hulu, while it's not easy, I think it's been a very, very challenging but rewarding thing to do, and it's to start with an idea and to start with a message and think about how that message applies to the various channels, so that it could apply to television just like it could apply to out of home or social or even search. And as we navigate this message, then we start to use the data and the insights on the back end to see how it's working. So a little bit on the data part, because a lot of this is grounded on data and insights. We use everything from a media marketing mix modeling up top to help us understand how to shift dollars between channels. And we use it at the bottom through a multi-touch attribution to help us understand which channels are driving the most subscriptions. Because at the end of the day, it's either about brand love and ultimately it's about subscriptions. The one thing that I in particular have had to resist is to start to optimize for subscriptions. Because when you double click on subscriptions, it's an output, it's not an input. It is very easy for us in marketing to start to optimize for that output and move everything towards that, back to the 4 stages, just jump to stage 3, right? Go to the third date. I can't go to the third date unless I've gone through the work and the effort of going through dates number 1 and number 2. And a lot of the data that we have around our audiences, around measuring our messaging recall, and ultimately around how our channels perform is to help us tweak and optimize and sometimes, quite honestly, change altogether our media mix. The last thing that I'll say is there's a lot of talk around data. And I think for marketers, it's become a bit of a crutch. Yes, we all need great data as marketers, but great data does not make great marketing. I think it's extremely important that we are able to look at information, tease out the insights that are important out of that information, and then apply our senses. That's the reason why I think great marketing takes that insight and turns it into something that is backed and relevant to the consumer. I was at a summit a couple weeks ago where there was a world champion on chess, Mr. Kasparov, and was talking about artificial intelligence. And it was fascinating because his punchline was basically that, yes, data and artificial intelligence is happening, is going to continue to happen, but it is a tool. And what he meant by that is, as skill sets for humans, we are going to move from data and analytics as our strength to a strength of sensing. And what he meant by that is applying that human factor to data. And that's something that particularly resonated with me, because I think as we go through all of these things, you can follow every single one of these steps and have a mediocre at best campaign or a mediocre at best brand. So it's not about just following the steps and following the rules, but it's about applying that human passion for what you do. And thankfully enough at Hulu, there's a lot of that passion to go around, which is why we've been lucky enough for this year to have great shows like The Handmaid's Tale and launch great products like our live TV, and ultimately be able to come up here and kind of give you some of this therapy of the lessons that we've gone through. The one thing that I'll say to kind of all the partners and potential partners is we as marketers get 1,000 calls a week, 1,000 emails. And what really differentiates the ones that kind of make it through to the pipeline is don't talk to me about your reach and your data. Talk to me about your insights about my audience. Talk to me about how you can play in that life cycle. And let's have a more strategic conversation, because I have news for you. Everybody has reach and data. Everybody's preaching reach and data. Like, that is not the way that you're going to break through among everyone else that is out there trying to get on a brand budget. It's about better understanding our audience and better understanding how your channel or your platform can bring a closer relationship to that consumer. So with that, thank you very much.
Pato, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to make a comment. It's great to see a company that is so data-rich, not using it as a crutch, but using real marketing principles to build your business and focus on insight, not just the plethora of data. So I think it's a great lesson for all of us, and maybe we'll see you at CES. And thank you. This is wonderful. Thanks so much, Pato.
Thank you.
Molto grazie.
Thank you.